So mostly this is a product-based show, but today I want to tackle something a little different. We're going to put our pros and cons up for shooting RAW. So, is shooting RAW worth it? Hey there everybody, welcome back to Worth It Wednesday, Full Mug Media's show where we tell you if something is worth it or not. And like I said in the intro, normally it's a product, but today we're gonna talk about whether or not shooting RAW with your camera, for those who don't know, that's an image profile setting. It's like a way that you capture images. And as always, anything I mention or anything I talk about will be listed in the description down below so you guys can dive in, look at some more specs, check out some links. They are affiliate links, by the way, but you guys can dive in and look at any amount of information you want. Now, we're gonna jump into the first pro, and it's a little cliche, but there's so much flexibility that you get in post when you shoot RAW. You can color grade things to look moody and happy and extra moody and overly happy. Like, you can do whatever you want. It's really versatile, and it really lets you start testing out, you know, okay, if I color grade things this way, how does that make people feel versus coloring them this way or that way? So it's really a good way to start getting into how to manipulate feeling through cameras, which is pretty much, I'd say, the basis for like filmmaking as a whole. It's a really good way to start getting your hands into that. But with all that extra flexibility in post comes huge file sizes, and that's actually gonna be the first con today, is file size. It takes a lot of space. One RAW photo is about 33 megabytes on my Canon 80D, so that's something to keep in mind. They're big files. If you're shooting video, that only scales up. Like, it's a lot. If you feel like you need the flexibility for something, like if you're shooting something and you're like, I don't really know how I'm gonna use this, shoot it RAW. If you know, for instance, something like this, I wouldn't shoot a talking scene RAW, but if I was shooting like a commercial, I would definitely shoot that RAW. So that way I could go back in there and make sure, you know, color grading matches up and all that kind of stuff, which is actually the second pro. Matching up color correction between cameras is a major key when you're editing for clients. So for instance, I had an interview that I edited one time that had 4 or 5 different camera angles, and 2 of them were Sony, 2 of them were Canon, and they did not mesh. And because they were not all shot RAW, I couldn't make them look the same. I did what I could, and at the end of the day, the client was happy, but it's still, I mean, personally, it didn't mesh to my standards. Personally, I feel like if you shoot all your client work RAW, there's never gonna be any issues. And if you don't shoot it all RAW, you don't have the space, that's fine. But if you don't shoot it all RAW, you could run into problems. And finally, that kind of brings me into the last con. It's really time consuming. It's honestly kind of scary even in the beginning when you haven't shot RAW before to go in and edit photos that way. If you're not used to it, it's a little intimidating, honestly. It feels like something that's like a next step up, and you're like, oh my gosh, shooting RAW, like that's... I remember when I got a camera from a friend of mine, JP, he sent me a Blackmagic, and that boggled my mind because the way you shoot with that and the way you shoot with something like an 80D are just different. And so it is a little scary, and it's a little time consuming. So if you've got a deadline and you shoot something and you're used to a certain workflow, I wouldn't switch up and shoot RAW for the first time when you've got, you know, X amount of hours to complete a project. But test it out on a couple of personal projects first, see if you like it. I mean, if you don't run into clients thinking you should do it, then, or if you don't run into that, like the problems, then you kind of don't need to. But in my opinion, it gives me so much more flexibility. It like lets me recreate photos that I thought were like lost and that weren't as good, or that maybe I'm like, the colors aren't great in that shot, but when you push it in Lightroom, they were. You know, you never know until you sit there and play with it. And so I would just really heavily suggest to anybody who's like considering shooting RAW, shoot a couple of personal projects RAW, see if you like it. It's gonna take more time. Just know that in the beginning, so sit down with the intention of, I'm gonna be here for longer than I normally would, and it'll come out a lot better. But at the end of the day, is shooting RAW worth it? I think absolutely, if you can afford the file space. You know, I mean, if you've got one SD card that's 16 gigabytes, maybe not. It's definitely something that adds to your tool bag, but it doesn't add it immediately. It's kind of like buying a drone. You gotta learn how to fly it. And as always, if you have any ideas for any other episodes of Worth It that you'd wanna see, put them in the comment section down below as well. I can't wait to read them all, because I'm sure you're all gonna do it. Share this with all of your Facebook friends, share this with all of your 9 Snapchat viewers left. I think that's enough. I think Facebook and Snapchat are good. chokeslammed? No, I'm just kidding. That's the end of the video. That's it right there. You want to get chokeslammed?